In 1948, a man named George Orwell published a visionary book describing a future society where everyone's life was controlled by a screen. At that time, that unlikely scenario seemed pretty worrisome, but no one really thought that that could really come into reality one day. And some maybe even thought that George Orwell had a screw loose. Today, that unlikely scenario has become our reality. And it's so real that it has turned into a big scandal about the use of our data. But I'm not surprised that the scandal came out, especially from an app that was supposed to test our personality. You might wonder what the Facebook scandal has to do with the topic of this speech. Are we what we eat? But before I answer the question, let me ask you, how well do you know yourselves? Do you think you know yourselves better than Facebook does? Maybe not. But why is it so important to know ourselves, especially in relation to today's topic? And why so many people are interested in us? They're interested in knowing what we think, how we behave, and especially what we buy. Well, we live in a time where who we are has become really important, because who we are guides our actions. And many people know this. And I think it has come, the time has come that we start to know ourselves better, and that we start to understand which aspects of our humanity, of our personality, we can leverage on in order to make healthier choices when we choose our food. And also, it's good that we become more aware of how the aspects of our personality, of our humanity in general, can be used and exploited by smart marketers who are trying to sell us another healthy food product. But we live in a time where more and more people are interested in food and in diet. Many people talk about food and are interested in food. The interest is so high that there's many people out there who would even like to start a new company in this field. So as a consequence of this increasing interest in food and healthy diet, we are constantly bombarded by confusing information. And this information comes from several different sources, and it's really confusing also because sometimes it's even scientists who don't use communication in a good way, and they confuse us sometimes. I promised that I would help you know yourself a bit better so that you could make better choices. This is a picture that I use just to describe essentially which are the components of our humanity, which are the ingredients of the secret sauce that turns us into human beings. But first of all, we are physical beings who act guided by our intellect and by our emotions. We find shelter in our spirituality. And we interact with other people by living in a society and by contributing to it through our jobs and to our work. So think about this picture during the presentation, and I will try to guide you through these factors, or at least a few of them, to tell you how some of these aspects can be exploited both by smart marketers, as I said before, but also how you can learn to recognize how you can use and understand yourselves better, thinking about this model, and to make a choice, better choice. First of all, Do you know how many decisions we take related to food every day? It's written in this slide. Is that number surprising? Every day, each of us takes a number of decisions related to food that is incredible. That's because our brain has developed the ability to take decisions at the unconscious level. Our brain wants to focus on new challenges every day. That's why we cannot spend a lot of time machine to concentrate on everyday choice. So when you choose, should I put some sugar in my coffee? That counts as a decision. When you choose whether you want to take candy, that counts as another decision. And even when you decide, should I put the entire bowl of candies hoping no one will see me? That's a decision as well. So first of all, it's important that you become aware of the amount of food-related decisions that you take every day. Do this experiment. Tomorrow, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, try to count, if you can, how many times you take a decision that is related to food. Even deciding not to eat something, that counts as a decision. You will be shocked by the number you will calculate. This is a picture of my dad slicing onions in the backyard of our house in Italy. Please don't ask me why he was cutting that many onions on that day, because I honestly have no idea. But why am I bringing up my dad? My dad, as many people of his age, has grown up in a society and in a culture that has shaped a very structured approach to diet. My dad has every day breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So our society is influencing us and is in some way shaping the way that we approach our diet. And our society nowadays, through advertising, through peer pressure, so the pressure from other people and what they are doing, influences us. And unfortunately, our society in particular is pushing us in a way that is not necessarily healthy and that is not necessarily doing good to us. One example of this is what I call uncontrolled snacking. It's become more and more acceptable, more than it used to be years ago, or more than it is in other types of societies in the world, to eat at any time of the day, anywhere, essentially. So this is becoming a normal way of eating. And if you read some food industry reports, this phenomenon is well known by those who are working on food advertising. And they are trying to repackage their messages to sell us healthy, high-protein snacks. But why do I say uncontrolled snacking? Because this phenomenon is pushing us into the direction where we no longer have control of our meals. Think about it. Think about yesterday. How many snacks did you have? Was that 1, 3, or even more? So think about this phenomenon, which is pushing you in a direction where you're losing progressively control of the amount of food you're eating, and especially also the type of food. Another interesting phenomenon that we observe in our society is that the amount of people eating alone is increasing. Now, eating alone, thanks to technology, has become more and more, let's say, less and less lonely, so to say. Because you can get into a restaurant, order a nice dish, then check in on social media, post a picture of what you're eating, and get comments from other people. But what's important here is that eating alone oftentimes means that you're eating while no one is watching. Now, don't get me wrong. If this is your reality, as it is mine, actually, I'm not suggesting that you invite someone over for dinner every day, but consider that this is a potential aspect of yourself, of your personality, of your life, that can in some way influence the way you eat. So try to spend some time to cook your meals, even if you're eating on your own. And then eat in a mindful way. Pay attention to the color of the food you're eating. Pay attention to how it smells. And then finally, how it tastes, how good it tastes. So in a way, eat in a more mindful way. And try to reduce the amount of screen time when you're eating. So try to avoid as much as possible the television or the computer. Many people eat in front of a computer when they eat by themselves. And pay attention also to your compulsive social media behavior, if you have a compulsive social media behavior. I promised at the beginning that I would guide you through the different aspects that compose our humanity, and one of them was our jobs, our work. Well, an important component and an important way that we can think about to describe human beings is their jobs, their education, and finally, their income. Epidemiologists used to define these three as the components of the socio-economic position. Each of us has a socio-economic position determined by his or her education, job or unemployment status, and income. And these factors can influence very strongly not only our food choices, but also our health in the future. It's one of the major determinants of future health, having a high socioeconomic position. Now, let me read this excerpt written by the American epidemiologist Adam Drinowski. Obesity has been linked repeatedly to consumption of low-cost foods. Refined grains, added sugars, and added fats are inexpensive, good tasting, and convenient. Energy-dense foods cost less per megajoule than nutrient-dense foods. The low cost of dietary energy, rather than specific food, beverage, or macronutrient, may be the main predictor of population weight gain. Through his studies, Drinowski demonstrated that a progressive reduction of the budget that could be invested in the food that people could buy progressively reduced also the ability of these people to buy healthy foods. Why? If you think about it, fast food is very cheap. And what costs more is fresh fruit and vegetables, which are also the most perishable foods. Fish and other healthy food cost quite a lot of money. Why am I mentioning this? Because keeping fighting income inequality in our society is important and fundamental. Also, because we can contribute by doing this to a healthier society. Because a more equal society is a healthier society as well. This is a post from my blog, and I wrote it a few years ago when I was wondering whether all of a sudden the nutrition science that I like so much had turned into a religion. Now, despite the fact that we live in a society that is progressively more secular and that we are less and less interested in religion and in official religions, many people still have a need for spirituality. And gurus, diet gurus, know this very well. Now, diet gurus are equivalent to preachers. What they do is that they identify a sin and then they preach that everyone should fight this sin. Once it's fat, another time it's carbohydrate, or gluten, or you name it. What's worrisome is that these people usually have a lot of followers. Followers who follow the guru's advice without even questioning it. So his message or her message turns into a form of evangelism. And most of all, the gurus preaches to bring more people into the cult, go out and tell everyone about the good news. And the problem is also that many of these gurus are also disguised as scientists. And they cherry pick, in a very smart way, studies from the scientific literature so that they can put together their message and make it even more credible. And they leverage on the fact that on the other side, the people who are listening are not necessarily so much into the topic that he is discussing. And this trick works so well that we can really apply it in many practical ways. Why am I showing you a picture of M&Ms? Because a few years ago, in the US, a university did this experiment. They invited 400 students and their families to an open day. And then at the entrance, they put 2 different bowls full of M&Ms, the popular candies. One bowl had a sign saying, regular M&Ms. The other bowl had a sign saying, new low-fat M&Ms. And to make things even more credible, the new low-fat fantastic M&Ms were painted in unusual colors, like gold, silver, so that it really seemed a new product. Guess what happened? At the end of the day, the scientists who performed this experiment estimated that those who picked from the low-fat bowl ate almost 30% more M&Ms than the other. It's so easy to trick. And this is the same thing, the same phenomenon that happens with light cigarettes, for instance. Once you turn to light cigarettes, you're probably going to increase the amount that you smoke. It's quite a common phenomenon. And so, this phenomenon is so common that we have become used to buy absence. What do I mean by that? We buy a food not for the ingredients, not for the nutrients that it contains, but because of those it doesn't contain. We buy low-fat food, low-salt food, we buy low-gluten food, we buy a lot of food that doesn't contain anything. Sometimes it's air popped, so we're really buying air instead of food. This is probably because we tend to associate food processing to adding something rather than to subtracting something. But even subtracting is a form of food processing. Because when you take out an ingredient, oftentimes you need to replace it with another thing. You need to replace it with thickeners, with preservatives, or other additives. So, most of the time, these additives that replace the ingredients that we want to avoid end up being even more dangerous than the factor that we wanted to avoid. So be careful when you decide to buy a food because it doesn't contain that specific component or ingredient you're trying to avoid. And think about, am I buying a very highly processed food which might contain many other things that I'd better avoid? So before you become a believer and you follow the advice of another guru, and every time you listen to someone's advice, think whether this person has any form of conflict of interest. think if this person is trying not only to sell you his or her advice, but if it's there's something practical, like a supplement or a new food line, that this person is trying to sell you together with his advice. And that's the reason why he's telling you, bring someone else into the cult, because they will become my clients. Compare what your favorite science communicator or guru, or how you want to call it, what he or she says with what the authorities say. Are they saying the same things? Are they in line? If not, start to think about why. And finally, find alternative ways to nurture your needs of spirituality. Nowadays, many people I know have approached and have embraced meditation, mindfulness. There's plenty of courses that you can check out, and there's also new apps that are coming out that helps you meditate and be more mindful. So think about if your desire to follow someone is probably maybe hiding the need for being more spiritual. This brings me to the last topic I wanted to discuss today, which is also the most slippery: our emotions, our feelings. Well, we all know that bad feelings can influence the way we eat. When we are depressed, disappointed, or simply stressed, we tend to eat more and worse food. Unfortunately, even good feelings can provoke and can be associated with overeating. When we're happy, we toast, and then we have a cake together, right? Well, sometimes we just feel good while we are eating, especially if we're doing this in good company, and we don't want this feeling to stop. So emotions are an important thing. And talking about emotions, how many people here have a favorite team or a favorite sport athlete? Anyone? 1, 2, 3. No, I don't. You probably agree that your favorite player or your favorite team can cause you a lot of emotional roller coasters. Sometimes this team loses, sometimes this wins, and sometimes it seems that the team is winning, but then all of a sudden the game turns the other way around and you lose again. Well, a study done by INSEAD, a French business school, showed that sports supporters tend to eat more when their team loses a game. And this is because probably they try to compensate for their bruised ego. Who knows? The bottom line is that we don't only need because of our physiological needs. We also, and sometimes particularly, eat because of our psychological needs. And one thing I usually help people become more aware of is whether you're eating because you're really hungry or whether you're eating because you're emotionally hungry. It's important to know the difference. You know what this is? How do you distinguish between real hunger and emotional hunger? Well, real hunger usually increases progressively. You have a meal, you're satisfied, and then hour after hour, your desire of having some more food increases. Then you can satisfy real hunger by eating any type of food. You just need to fill up your stomach. And when you're done, you feel satisfied with no guilt at all. On the other side, when you eat because you're emotionally challenged, this type of hunger usually comes all of a sudden, as if someone hit the on-off button. And that on-off button can be a stressful situation or an unpleasant discussion or a terrible thought or worry you have. So this type of hunger comes all of a sudden. And all of a sudden you need to satisfy this need for food with something specific, like chocolate. I use cheese, but I tend to be quite a weird person. But chocolate is very popular. You eat this chocolate, you feel good for a few seconds, and then you have a huge burden because you feel very guilty for what you've done. What can you do here? First of all, think about the rules that I just taught you and learn how to distinguish real hunger and emotional hunger. Stop 1 second every time you need to eat and think about, okay, am I going to eat because I'm hungry or because I'm emotionally challenged? And then try to find alternative routines. Leverage on the other senses. Like, for instance, I listen to music. Or you can take, if you're home, you can take your cat and caress it and use the touch. So find alternative routines. What's the take-home message for today? First of all, our dietary choices are often guided by factors that are strictly correlated with ourselves. And it's important to know that, especially emotions. Be careful and beware trends and gurus. Oftentimes it's an old message repackaged in a new way just to sell something new. A healthy diet is not that complicated. It's all about avoiding highly processed food and food high in sucrose, and have instead a lot of fruit, vegetables, beans, and nuts. And finally, be less obsessed by the latest nutrition in science, and be more interested instead in yourselves. Because at the end of the day, we eat what we are. And I would like to thank you, especially for being here on such a sunny day. I know you want to go out and enjoy the sun. Please visit my website and connect with me on social media. I promise I won't spy on you guys. And I'm glad to take a few questions if time allows.